Welcome to Dr. Lottie's Science with Soul, the podcast that transcends the boundaries between science and spirituality. Prepare to be uplifted, transformed, and awakened to create a path to healing your own life physically, emotionally, and spiritually by bridging the gap between science and soul. Welcome to Dr. Lottie's Science with Soul. Today's guest is Marianne Williamson. And for more than 4 decades, Marianne Williamson has been a leader of spiritually progressive circles. She is the author of 16 books, 4 of which have been a #1 New York Times bestseller. A quote from the mega-bestseller, A Return to Love: "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." And that quote is considered an anthem for a contemporary generation of seekers. Her other bestsellers have included A Woman's Worth, The Law of Divine Compensation, Tears to Triumph, and The Gift of Change. With her books and online classes, she has taught millions of people the universal spiritual principles at the heart of miracle-minded thinking. Williamson's founded Project Angel Food, a non-profit organization that has delivered more than 18 million meals to ill and dying homebound patients in the Los Angeles area since 1989. The group was created to help people suffering from the ravages of HIV/AIDS. She has also worked throughout her career on poverty, anti-hunger, racial reconciliation issues, and in 2004, she co-founded the Peace Alliance and supported the creation of a U.S. Department of Peace. Williamson's latest book, titled The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love, is available online and at bookstores everywhere. Welcome, Marianne. It's such an honor to have you as a guest today.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about your recently released book, which is titled The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love. So can you elaborate a little bit on why you put mystic in the title?
I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian scholar. I'm a student of a set of books called A Course in Miracles. The Course is not a religion. It calls itself a psychological mind training on the relinquishment of a thought system based on fear and the acceptance instead of a thought system based on love. There is a place in the Course where it talks about how religion and psychotherapy at their peak become one, because you're talking about a healing of the mind. So there is an ecclesiastic Christian religious tradition, dogma, doctrine, and it is based around the narrative concerning the historical Jesus and his life 2,000 years ago. There's nothing in this book to disparage that, to disrespect that, to undermine that. But the metaphysical, or what has been called since the earliest days of Christendom, the Gnostic tradition, has to do with the inner experience of the Holy Spirit, which does not need to be monitored or brokered by an external institution, but which has to do with a sense of knowing within our hearts. And within that tradition, we look at a lot of the lines of Jesus and the life of Jesus in, I think, a more expanded way. For instance, when he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." Well, that was 2,000 years before Sigmund Freud was born. And even though philosophical and artistic elucidations of the inner life go back to the beginning of time, the very notion that there is a realm of consciousness that is as real as the external world is relatively new in human history. The idea that there are objective, discernible laws of the inner life as well as the outer life, relatively new in human history. So then the line in Romans, conform not with the patterns of the world, instead seek a renewal of the mind. You step back and you go, wow, this is relevant not only in terms of the historic Jesus 2,000 years ago, but relevant in terms of our lives at any given moment of any given day, that there is code there, as it were, not only concerning the life that he lived, but the learning that the lives that each of us lives. And this gives the notion of Jesus, it frees it from the constrictions of institutional dogma, narrative, and doctrine, to almost like Jesus himself, almost like he's been put away in some musty glass box on the third floor of some museum, and just unlock it, bring it out, fresh air. And I think we gain a much more expanded view of something that cannot be monopolized by any religion. Nobody gets to monopolize the breeze. Nobody gets to own the sunlight. That you're talking about a force of consciousness, a spiritual force of consciousness that is available at a time when I think we're rethinking everything. That's this moment, right? I know you're in medicine, rethinking health, healing, medicine, business, politics. We're rethinking everything. In fact, we must, if we are to create a sustainable path going forward. And that means, among other things, rethinking so much of religion and spirituality. And that's, to me, the mystic Jesus, a Jesus that you may or may not align with in terms of Christian dogma, but which means it is freed, so that those who do not necessarily think of themselves as Christian or have any attraction to any of that might see as relevant to our practical day-to-day existence.
Yeah, I mean, I loved your book. And when I
Thank you.
read it, it was such a breath of fresh air, because I find that a lot of spiritual texts don't really go into the depth, like you uncovered the depth of Jesus itself. And I think it's hard to come by in today, because a lot of books that are self-help books, they're very much more surfacey, and they don't really dig down deep into the meaning of life itself. So what do you believe is our spiritual purpose as humans?
To love, to extend love. I think there are two questions in any situation, which, if we answer them in alignment with the deepest truths of our heart, transform our lives. Number one, who am I? Number two, why am I here? If you see yourself in any situation, I'm here as a representative of God's love on earth, that I am an idea in the mind of God. I am literally love encased in human skin with hands and feet and a brain. And I am here to extend that love into this situation, that the situation might be lifted to expand its miraculous possibilities. And that has to do with, like I said, any moment and any circumstance in which we find ourselves.
Yeah, and when I read the book, I've had two near-death experiences, out-of-body near-death experiences myself. And the things you learn before I had these experiences, I thought, you die, it's black, you're gone. And then I realized that when your body is in the ER on the bench below you, you are still there as a soul, right? But when I read your book, that so clearly came through, that it made me think, wow, like you speak like you had a near-death experience, like you've already been to the other side and came back, like you have that deep understanding of the soul and who we are as souls and humans in this life. So and the way you deal with just regular day situations, and when I got to the part where you experienced public humiliation watching a theater production, and I thought that was such an interesting story, and such a, it takes somebody who really understands who they are in order to approach it the way you did. Are you able to share that story? What happened?
Truth is simple, but life is complicated. These principles are easy enough to understand. Life is hard. So, yes, the Course in Miracles says birth is not the beginning, it's a continuation of your life. Death is not the end, it's a continuation of your life. Who you really are is not your body. The body is like a suit of clothes. And that essence of who you are, one name of which is the Christ, is created in a way that makes you invulnerable to the lovelessness of the world, whether it comes from other people or from yourself. And that to the extent to which you identify only with the Christ, you are invulnerable. To the extent to which you identify with the insanity of the world, you are at the effect of the insanity of the world. Okay, easy enough to understand abstractly. But the Course in Miracles says that enlightenment begins as an abstract concept and then begins a journey without distance from the head to the heart. Okay, so in that situation, as you said, I went to see a play, and the play was a one-woman show. The woman had cancer, and I thought she came to my lectures. I had visited her. We had talked quite a bit. I thought I had been present for her in her experience. As an example of that, I went to see the play. I was like, oh, she's got this play. I want to support her. And in the middle of the play, and I was living in LA, it was a small theater, but it was public. People were there. And at that time, I was lecturing. So, people knew who I was and the kind of people would be there. And she took a swipe at me. I can't remember what it was, but it was some kind of sarcastic comment, like, we know how Marianne is, or something like that. It was kind of, and I was shocked, but I was also embarrassed. She was doing this publicly. And so we're leaving the theater, and my friend who I'd gone with is a psychotherapist. And he just said to me as we walked out, well, that has to be kind of tough. He said, if you want to call me this week and process that, I'll certainly be available. And it was one of those moments where, from a miracle-minded perspective, I had a choice. Okay, Marianne, you can identify with what just happened. Get out your violin. How could she do that to me? I'll bet you there are even support groups for people who have been diminished by people they thought were their friends. You could probably get some people to gather around you and tell you she shouldn't have done it. You can do that. Or you can make another choice. Because really, this is what it's about. It's about the fact that consciously or unconsciously, we're deciding at every moment. And sometimes things happen you would not have chosen or weren't in your control, but you're always in control. You are always responsible for who you choose to be in the space of the experience. So I prayed. I just had some leaning into, because that's really what it's about. You just try to, I think that's what it means when Jesus turned the other cheek. Look at this through a different set of eyes. And I got the sentence in my head from the Course in Miracles: the Christ in you cannot be crucified. In other words, the real you could care less that somebody was mean to you, somebody made fun of you in public. The you that even cares is not the real you. This is a worldly phenomenon that, in the bigger scheme of things, means very little, and you will determine the effect that it has on you going forward. So I did hear that. I got that in my mind, and you can make another choice. The Course in Miracles says, I can choose again. I am willing to see this differently. You can see everything through the eyes of love or the eyes of fear. So I just got that. So before we left, I told my friend I needed to go to the ladies' room. I went to the ladies' room. I'm coming back out, and I see a woman that I hadn't seen in a few years. Hi, how you doing? Hi, how are you? What are you doing here? Well, I'm the producer of the show. Did you enjoy it? Now, this is interesting because I think if I had not had that thought that I mentioned before, I think I might have responded with some bristle. Instead, my heart had been touched, and I said, actually, no. I was quite embarrassed by what she said. So I think that starts it. She didn't get from me attack, judgment, or defense. She got a real, like, speaking from my heart. That I was hurt by that. To which she responded something along the line of, "Yeah, I'm really sorry about that." I told her, "I don't know what that line is about. Do you really want to?" I would suggest you take that line out, but she put it in. I said, "Well, what would you suggest that I do?" She said, "I would suggest that you email her." So I started to compose an email, and it was one of those things where, like, you have to ask your friends, is it ready to send? Is it ready to send? And a friend will say, nope, there's still that one snarky comment, or no, there's still that one little jab, or no, there's still that one little defensive place. And I kept reading it to my best friend. He said, okay, now you can send it. And she wrote back and she apologized. And even more importantly, she took out the line. Now, what is the point here? The point is that if I had just gone into anger and how dare you, and how could she, I don't think she would have taken the line out. So what do you want? Do you want to be right or to be happy? Do you want to have your attitude, or do you want a miracle here? Because a miracle can happen. The universe is always ready to recalibrate. But if I hadn't gone into my heart, and if I hadn't remembered that, be the real you, because the real you is love. If you can face this with fear, or you can face this with love, go into your heart, speak from your heart to hers. And that's true in every situation. Theologically, in terms of things like the book, the consciousness while in the midst of the crucifixion, because that situation was metaphysically a crucifixion. It's what lovelessness would do to our love. Listen, she didn't do anything that I haven't done in my life in terms of recklessly, irresponsibly forgetting the feelings of another person. What? I've never done that. But the issue is, it can be corrected. Let's treat each other with love and speak from love. And so, in that moment, I had a choice. So you're in the midst of that crucifixion situation, and your consciousness while in the midst of it will determine whether you stay on that cross or resurrect, i.e. have a new beginning, a return to right mind, and theoretically more love than there was before.
Yeah, and that ties in beautifully to, how does our ego influence our actions and reactions?
Well, this is a very interesting point. We tend to think that we have neutral thoughts. So from A Course in Miracles perspective, free will means you can choose what you want to think. You have that power. The power you do not have is the power to diminish the power of each thought. Every thought will create form on some level. So what that means is that if it's a loving thought, it's going to be an opening of possibility for good for all concerned. But if it's a negative thought, there's no such thing as a neutral thought. It's either light or the absence of light, which is darkness. It's either love or the absence of love, which is fear. So any mental energy that does not proactively support love supports neurosis, conflict, separation, even pathology. It's you know what I liken it to? I liken it to addiction. Addiction is not just out to inconvenience you. Addiction wants to kill you. And so the Course in Miracles says the ego is suspicious at best and vicious at worst. So the ego is loveless thought. But loveless thought is powerful thought in terms of the illusions of this world. Lovelessness has no effect in the real world, world with a capital R, beyond this plane. But within this plane, its effects are as real as is the truth. That's what all pain and suffering comes from. The fights with each other, wars, destruction of the planet. That's the power. Now, you can call it ego, you can call it Satan, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it is the mind disconnected from love. And who among us doesn't know its power? The problem being, the Course said, that on this earth, we are living at the effect of a thought system dominated by fear. And that's why any serious spiritual path is dismantling of a thought system based on fear, which is posited on the belief that we're separate from each other, that we're in competition with each other, to one in which we realize we're one with each other, here to collaborate with each other, and which they are like parallel universes. And every moment, consciously or unconsciously, we're deciding, and only we can decide which world to inhabit.
Yeah, beautifully explained. And when you had that reaction at the theater too, I mean, that just shows so beautifully how you were in control of your ego because of your understanding, right? You could just have gotten mad and let your ego take over.
In that moment, listen, I don't make that 24/7. I mean, there are some moments that I could point to and go, I didn't take that moment. I tell another story in the book where I got it wrong, where I went into this business meeting and I think to myself, what did I not pray before? I didn't bless everybody before I walked in, and I just carried this kind of negativity. And then I saw the effects of my own negativity, and I was embarrassed by myself. I was humiliated. People were looking at me thinking, wow, I thought Marianne Williamson would be nicer. It's like, and all it would have taken is one moment, be still and know. One moment before you go in the room, line it, because, and I remember I've gone over that so many times. I remember I was rushing in from the airport. It's just like you're in chaos. You've been reading Twitter. You've been whatever it was. Take a moment. Come back to yourself. Be still and know. It's what the Course in Miracles calls the holy instant. If I had taken one instant to just bless the room before I went in, bless everybody, remember who you are. I am love. Why am I here? To extend love. It would have been a completely different meeting for me. That's how powerful the mind is. Another story, I don't think I tell the story there, but a tremendous lost opportunity on a professional level. All I had to do was say to the person, could I take the weekend to think about it? And in that case, she's someone I could have said, could I take a moment to pray, take a day to pray about this? In a lot of situations that wouldn't be appropriate, but in any situation, you could say, I'd like a day or two to think about this, please. But instead, the ego speaks first, the ego speaks loudest, and the whole thing frightened me, and I said, no, thank you. Because I was just fear answers. The ego speaks first, and the ego speaks loudest. So this is what I mean by the practical applicability of practicing principles that make all the difference, whether the situation unfolds harmoniously or disharmoniously, and that's all that's happening in this world.
How do you feel the human soul is different from the human body? Now, people, if you just ask somebody, who are you? We tend to identify with our body. But how would you explain the human soul as being different from the body?
I think the spirit is the truth of who we are. The body is temporary. The body is a suit of clothes. The Course in Miracles says, and I think we mentioned this before, physical birth is not the beginning of your life. It's a continuation of your life. Physical death is not the end of your life. It's a continuation of your life. The Course in Miracles says one day we will evolve to be a species where the recognition is that death is not the punishment. Death is the reward. And that there will be nothing to fear. We will lay down a suit of clothes, just like we get undressed in the evening. And there will be no question but that we're still here, right? Yeah, I think of death as there's channel 4, channel 6, channel 9. There's the network and there's the cable. Well, maybe you don't get cable. That doesn't mean nobody's broadcasting on cable. It just means your set's not picking it up. And that's what I believe. But getting to the point where that belief is matched by an actual experience is something different, obviously. But that's the evolutionary journey we're on. And that's also, I think, the meaning in the Bible when he says, those who know me will not know death. I think what it means is that you will not experience it as death. There's a concept in metaphysics called the great rays. And the idea here is that we're moving to the point where we will honestly register so much light around one another that the body itself will seem more shadowy and the light will be so great that when we hear somebody's died, all it will mean is a shadow is gone that hides the light. And I know that I remember years before I was into any of this stuff, I remember a boss of mine being at lunch with a man I was working for. And he said something that startled me at the time. He said, my relationship with my father has only improved since his death. Mm-hmm. And now I know that on such a deeper level when I think of My mother and my father, for instance. You see things more clearly when all the worldly stuff drops away. And you were, of course, talking about your own near-death experiences.
Yeah, and it's so different. So I'm also an evidential psychic medium. So I bring in spirits for loved ones. And it's very interesting because if somebody has had a negative experience with this human, during their life, and they were maybe not treated right by this person, but when this person comes through from the spirit world, I have never had a spirit that was not apologetic and wanted to send love back to the person that they had hurt while they were here. So, and it's very interesting because it's such a clear, because I'm a medium, I know that the spirit world is real and exists because they know things about my clients that there's no way I would know, right? And they know what they did last week or what happened after they passed away. So it's really interesting because it really clearly proves that the spirit world is absolutely real and alive and well.
Did you have that power before your near-death experiences, or did your near-death experiences open that aspect of your mind?
So I've been told by my teachers that I have worked with that it was always there. And as a child, I did see things. I knew spirits were around. I saw spirits in the candle. I knew it belonged to grandma. And I would tell one of my brothers, look, there's a spirit in there. Right. And he would look and say, I don't know. I don't see anything. And then I squashed it all growing up because my friend couldn't see anything. My brother couldn't see it. So I just squashed it. And then I had my near-death experience. And then after the first one in the ER, I was hemorrhaging after my third childbirth. And that next morning, while I was still in the hospital, I heard my sister-in-law talking to me in the ceiling. I'm thinking, what happened? Like yesterday, I left my body, and now I think I hear my sister-in-law because there was no belief system in place. So it completely changed my life. And then for the next 12 years, I had visitations from the spirit world. I knew before things were going to happen, people were sick and all these different things. And then after 12 years, I said, all right, now I trust it. And then I went to medical school when I was 54. And then I graduated. And then as soon as I graduated, I ran into a woman who told me I have to go to Arthur Findlay College in England and study mediumship. And so it's a long story, but that's how it happened. So then as soon as I was in medical school, I started getting information about my patients that hadn't even been assigned yet. And so then that all became medical mediumship and evidential mediumship as I came out of medical school. But it's all because of the near-death experience, because that opened up, I'm going to say, those channels. But I was born with a channel, but I never developed it until I had that experience.
Are you a practicing physician now?
I'm not in clinic anymore, but I work with people online.
Well, fascinating story.
Yeah, I do a lot of like mediumship
Well,
reading,
so
ancestral healing, and things like that
and
now.
makes you kind of medical intuitive.
Yeah, because the spirit
Wow,
world,
fascinating.
yeah, it is fascinating. I'm like, I
How
didn't
many
choose it.
how many physicians are also mediums? Wow,
I
that's
know
amazing.
it is really, I mean, I know, I
Well,
understand that it's
you're
part
true
of this,
functional medicine.
right? It's just my incarnation. And I've been
Yeah.
told that it's in my astrological chart, the actual day when I had my first near-death experience, the planets were lined up in the specific way. And it's all, I mean, our life here on earth is such a divine experience, right? And during my second near-death experience, I stood in the light, which is God or source or whatever you want to call it. But that light is just pure unconditional love and light. And we come from that light. We carry that light within us. We are love. We come from this source, right? So when I read your book, it was like, wow, it's like she had a near-death experience. It's almost
Of
like
course.
or you look at the world the same way I look. We see the world through the same lens or understanding, but you came to it from a whole different perspective through the Course in Miracles. And, other people, I have a friend who's an astrologer. She came to it studying astrology for the last 30 or 40 years.
Absolutely.
So,
There's one truth
right?
spoken and expressed in many different ways.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating to read your book and get an understanding of how you see it and how you came to that understanding, right? So for me, that's just fascinating, how you understand all of that. But now in your book, you also talk about how Jesus' life is like a hologram. So, because that's how I see it too. It's not really, I just want you to share how you see that.
Well, first of all, remember time itself. Einstein said time and space are but are illusions of consciousness, albeit persistent ones. So there's a level on which we are always obviously experiencing now. So the past is only in your mind and the future is only in your mind. A hologram, if you cut up a hologram into a lot of different pieces, you don't get a little piece of the picture here and a little piece of the picture there and a little piece of the picture there. Rather, every little piece of it entails the entirety of the picture. And so we are all embodiments of the same picture, and that is the soul seeking to reclaim itself. The Course in Miracles says that we are ideas in the mind of God. The mind of God is this infinite ocean of love that you were talking about. It's all that is, and nothing else can exist, because what is all encompassing can have no opposite. That means any thoughts we think that are separate from love are actually this gigantic hallucination, which is the mortal world. But it feels very real while we're in it. It feels as real as the real world. It's the real with a little r, and the real world is a world with the big R. And every single person is experiencing the journey. We are here in a world which in many ways is counter to our own nature. And we experience the trials and the tribulations of living in such an uncomfortable space, under the illusions that this is all that is, going through the experiences that either wake us up out of the illusion or deepen our experience of it. And ultimately, one way or the other, either slowly or quickly, open our eyes to see what's true. And, you were talking about the near-death experience. There's a line in the Course, I think it's, learn all this now, or you can learn it at the point of death. You can do that too. So it actually points to that this is all going to be clear to you at the point of death. But you know what? You could get it right now if you want to.
Yeah.
Which is, and the Course says it's not up to you what you learn. It's merely up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. You can either open to the idea that there's another world that's possible and you can live within it now, and thus be part of a great revolutionary birthing process. Or you can close your heart, close your mind, close your eyes, and continue to experience this nightmare of human separation and conflict and pain, thus not only dooming yourself to more of it, but other people as well. That's really all that's going on here. It seems very complicated, but in a very real way, it's really quite simple.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because I think you mentioned in the book that the fact that we think we're separate is an illusion, right?
The line, the Course in Miracles, I love this part in the Course. It says, you are like sunbeams thinking you are separate from other sunbeams.
Yeah.
You are like waves in the ocean thinking you're separate from other waves. Now, if you think about it, there's really no place where one sunbeam stops and another starts. There's no place where one wave stops and another starts. But think of the psychological difference between perceiving yourself as separate from the rest of the ocean versus perceiving yourself as one with the rest of the ocean. If I think of myself as separate from the rest of the ocean, I think of myself as one little wave. And how can I not live in constant terror that I will be annihilated by a wave that's bigger than me? But if I think of myself as one with the rest of the ocean, I'm like comfortable here. Wave moves, ocean moves, I move, but I'm safe here. So the physical senses tell me you're over there and I'm over here. The inner eye tells me, well, it's all a quantum field. There's no place where you stop and I start. The fact that you're in New Mexico and I'm in DC means nothing, because in the mind, there is no separation. It also means what I do to you, I do to myself. It means that if I'm generous to you, I'm being generous to myself. It means that if I'm withholding from you, I'm withholding from myself. It's just a completely different filter, which leads to completely different behavior, which leads to completely different experience.
Absolutely. I call it the boomerang
And then
effect.
Jesus becomes an internal guide, should we choose, um, available, should we wish. The Course in Miracles says he's not the only one, a non-exclusive elder brother. He says in the Course, I don't have anything you don't have. The only difference between us is I don't have anything else. I am in a state which is only potential in you. It is the evolutionary potential of the human race to achieve all the achievements you've talked about in your own life. That's where we're all headed, but we're headed there slowly or we're headed there quickly. And I think what's happening on the planet today is a sense of urgency, because the world that is crumbling will overwhelm us should we not choose to give birth to the world trying to be born a little more quickly than we're doing now.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. We're all, it's like the boomerang effect. What we send out also comes back. And
Both
like
ways, right?
during my second near death experience, they showed me, I met these spirit guides after I was in the light and heard the music. And they showed me the grid around the earth. And they said everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. So, when you talk about how, what you do to somebody else, you're also doing to yourself, because we're all one, we're all connected. And once we understand that, we can make humanity understand that. I think the animals are ahead of us, right? Once we can make humanity understand that, we can probably finally stop war, and we can start understanding that we're all going to come back too. I don't know. What is your thought on reincarnation? Because when we have wars and we hurt other people, that's going to be you in the next life. That's how I look at it.
The Course in Miracles says that on one hand, the point is that there is no time. So there is no past. So if you have a past life, so if we have past lives, they're all happening in this moment. And reincarnation is a positive belief because it reminds you that you have a bigger life than the life of this incarnation. But the Course in Miracles says it can be unhelpful if it keeps you so focused on what happened before that you give less attention than you might to what's happening right now. As a matter of fact, I remember those books by Richard Bach. Remember the Jonathan Livingston Seagull? And then that other one where he says, why are you looking to your past lives for information? Look to your future lives for information. That's when you know a lot more than you know now, which I found just a mind-boggling experience. May I ask you a question about your own story? When you had those two experiences, were you given a choice whether or not to come back? How did that go down?
No choice. It
You
was,
just
what is
found
she
yourself
doing
back?
here? She has to go back. And I was like, no, please tell me a little bit before I go back.
Oh, because it was so comforting and comfortable there?
No, so I had my first near-death experience was in 1992, and then I had a second one in 1994. And I had been trying to put all the pieces together for 2 years now, and here in the spirit world is visiting me. Loved ones are passing away and showing up in the middle of the night. And so when I got to this place and I saw the light and heard the most beautiful music, they said, what is she doing here? She has to go back. She can't be here. And I said, no, wait. Tell me, how does this work? How can I be outside my body and still be me? And that's when they showed me the grid around the earth, and they said everything is connected. And that's literally what my work is today, is to help people resolve their issues, because we're all connected. We're all one. And I work a lot with ancestral, ancestral can be your mom, right? It can be your mom, your grandma, your grandpa. But the way it shows up and the patterns that we repeat within the generations, because of the perception that we live our own life from, right? So if I can help people change their rose-colored glasses to a different color glasses, I can help them heal, and I can help them move forward and raise their consciousness and allow them to see how miracle and what a miracle they are, right? I mean,
that is the miracle,
right? We are miracles.
It's to realize you are one. Yeah.
And there was no
totally
time, right? That's one
saying.
thing, right? My first near-death experience in the ER, the first thing was like, there's no time on the other side. You have access to past, present, and future all at the same time. Drove me crazy for years, We lived in San Francisco
Right.
at the time, and I searched that library high and low for anything that could show me the grid or explain why there's no time in this other state, right? But it's just, that's just how it is. There is no time. So I completely understand what you're saying. It's like the past life is
About
really happening now.
reincarnation, yeah.
It's just something we experience when we're in this physical incarnation.
The Course says it's a learning tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a learning tool. So if I slap you, then a moment later or 10 minutes later or 10 years later, you or someone else will slap me back. It seems to have taken time. It actually was programmed in that moment. The time is used to show me that. You know, you've mentioned a couple of times the music that you heard.
Mm-hmm.
I had an experience once. I was in my 20s and I had taken a nap. And you know how sometimes there's that space between waking and sleeping? And for some reason, in that space between waking and sleeping, I heard the heavenly choir.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remind you, I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
There is no concept that I know of in Judaism, I don't think, of the heavenly choir. But I woke up and knew that I had just heard the heavenly choir. And this is what it was. Every soul sang its note. Every soul. So that would mean your soul, which is the best aspect of you, singing their note. And it formed a heavenly choir. It was the most beautiful music. I also was reading on the internet the other day about a section of Beethoven's, I don't know if it's Beethoven's ninth, that is the perfect frequency of healing, something like that. We're just beginning, aren't we? And I speak to you here as a doctor as well as a medium. We're just beginning to understand. We're just scratching the surface of the power that sound can have,
Oh, yeah.
right?
The power of sound, I think, is
We're such babies. We think we're so advanced, but we're such
future
babies.
medicine, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's amazing the power of sound. But yeah, that music was, so when I saw the light, which was kind of like standing in a spotlight, like a fog spotlight, because the light is everywhere, like you're submerged in the light. But in the light, there was an outline of angels, but I didn't believe in angels. So I'm seeing something I didn't believe in, but I know, I mean, I understand why it had to be this way. Because if they had shown me something I believed in, I would have said, oh, it's just my brain.
Right.
Because that would just
Right.
explain it away, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So scientific. So of course it had to be angels, and the music was coming from the angels. I spent a week at our big Roland synthesizer that we had at the time trying to figure out if there was any sound that came even close to what I had heard. But there, I haven't found, and I've other people that have heard the music of the heavens or the heavenly choir have tried to create music if they were musicians, but it's close, but it's not the real thing. It's more beautiful.
No, because I heard what it was. Like I said, it was every soul. I don't know if it was every soul, past, present, future. Just all I got was every soul singing their note.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it. I mean, just think of what the world will be
Mm-hmm.
when and this is our evolutionary potential. This is what it means to say heaven and earth shall be as one. There will be a time, or we'll go extinct. Those are only two choices. There will be a time when, from the moment we wake up in the morning, and this is, the Course in Miracles says about Jesus, he lived on the earth, but thought only the thoughts of heaven, meaning the awareness of our oneness. That's what the great spiritual and religious avatars are, the mutations which open up an evolutionary possibility, right? If a species gets to the point where its behavior collectively is maladaptive for its survival, it will either go extinct or it will evolve. So whether it's Jesus or any of the other great religious or spiritual avatars, they provide a way for the species to move in a different direction. So they actualize, right, what it means that a human being wakes up in the morning, and from the moment we awaken, one loving perception is followed by another loving perception, is followed by another loving perception, is followed by another loving perception in this endless cascade of pure love. How could that be anything but bliss
Yeah.
and beauty?
Mm-hmm.
The Course in Miracles says you are an idea in the mind of God, and
Mm-hmm.
an idea doesn't leave its source. You just think you did.
Mm-hmm.
You are thinking that you are separate from that from which you cannot be separate.
In the Course of Miracles, I have never read the Course of Miracles, but I have a friend who showed me the Forgotten Song in the Course of Miracles. And I'm going to say that is probably the best description I have come across of the music that I heard, because it's that, it talks about how it's the forgotten song, but when you hear the music, it seems like you heard it yesterday. There is something very familiar about the music. And I'm going to say that is very much the experience I had. It was like, I know this.
Now, the Course in Miracles
It's
says
like,
there's an ancient melody you
mm-hmm.
can't quite get out of your mind and to
Yeah.
which you long to return.
Yeah.
I read a book many years ago. I think it was called The Paradise Myth. I think. And it was talking about how in every religious and spiritual tradition, there is the myth of paradise. And what it is an ancient memory that's stuck in the subconscious of the human mind. You know it exists because you were there once.
Yeah. I'm going to agree with
And
that.
this longing to return. The Course
Mm-hmm.
in Miracles says it's an ancient melody which you can never quite get out of your mind. And you're homesick for it. And that's what physical incarnation is. There's a homesickness we live with. And the Course says the answer is not to jump out of this incarnation, but to bring the consciousness, that consciousness here to earth, which is everything we're talking about.
Yeah. So how does our grievances keep us from moving forward?
The Course in Miracles says you can have a grievance or you can have a miracle. You cannot have both. And a grievance is by definition a perception that is based on the past, which does not exist because it's only in your mind. And it's by definition based on your belief that someone is guilty. And guilt is only something that somebody does with their physical self, but it is not the truth of who they are. Love is the truth of who they are. But if I choose to perceive their guilt, I cannot but experience my own feeling of guilt. So every thought opens to love, invites love, correction, healing, recalibration, or closes the heart, thus deflecting the miracle that would otherwise occur. If I'm into, you did this to me, you did this to me, you did this to me, all the universe is saying is fine. If that's your choice to see it that way. The Course in Miracles says you are heir to the rules that prevail within the world you identify with. The Course in Miracles says enlightenment is a shift in self-perception from body identification to spirit identification. So if I have a grievance against you, it's because of something you did to me. But to the extent to which I continue to attach myself to the thought of what you did to me, I will be at the effect of what you did to me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, I want to say here, because I'm going through something myself,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much easier said than done sometimes. And I think that that's worth acknowledging.
Absolutely.
That sometimes, I have in my own life a couple of things. Why are you not letting this go?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you not letting this go? It doesn't cause you joy. Thinking about it causes you suffering. You've done your work. You've atoned for your mistake. You get why? And it's incredible the power that the ego has. Oh, let's think about it some more.
Yeah.
It's just like the nails on the cross, the nails on the cross. But you can have that grievance. I see it in my own life. I see it, I ran for president, and there are two ways I can look at it now. One way, more you're going to become a really angry, bitter old lady. Say they did this, and let me tell you, and you can do that, Marianne. You want that experience of these last years of your life? Is that what you want? Bitter, pathetic, angry, taut, is that what you want? Because if you can open your heart, do the work, atone for your own mistakes, forgive others theirs, if you, to the extent you can rise above this, you will have more love, more light, more bliss. At least make that your willingness. And that's the meaning of those 3 days. between the crucifixion and the resurrection. You're in the tomb. You're doing the work. You're working it. What I love, and once again, in the Mystic Jesus, what I talk about is just like when people say to you that every character in your dream is an aspect of yourself. Every character in scriptural story, this is true of Buddha's story, Moses, Jesus, it's an aspect of you. So when the angels, the thoughts of God, tell the women who come to get the body, he isn't here, he's risen. To me, that's so psychologically significant. What it means is the old you is not going to emerge from this. The old you won't even exist anymore. There will be molecular rearrangement, and I'm sure you as a physician understand all that much more than I do. You're not going to be the same person. You're not going to have the same perceptions. You're not going to have the same experiences. And that's why the resurrection, which the Course in Miracles says is a return to your right mind. There are no grievances there. They've fallen away. The grievances turn out to have been the cross. You think the cross was what they did to you. The real cross is the fact that their lovelessness toward you tempted you into lovelessness toward them.
And any advice for the listeners, how they can find peace within themselves in the kind of chaotic world that we live in today?
Bless everybody. Forgive everybody. At least be willing. Remember who you are. Remember that we are love. We are on this earth to love. Before you walk into a room, blast it with love. Bless the people you love. Bless the people you don't love. You know, this morning, I found myself saying a prayer for the presidential candidate I voted for. And then I said to myself, shouldn't you maybe bless the others also? Well, but I'm afraid if I bless the other one, they'll do well. No, Marianne, it doesn't work this way. You're praying for peace.
Yeah.
You know what? No, don't bless selectively. Bless everybody. That's listen. With this, you and I are talking about this literally on the eve of the election. The last thing we need is for anyone, particularly whoever loses the election, to not be in their right mind. We need everyone. Half of the country is going to be very disappointed. And what's important is that all of us be loving each other, both those you agree with and those you disagree with. Martin Luther King said, God said, I have to love my enemies. He didn't say I have to like them. Yeah,
No,
I think that's so important right now. Yeah.
Because we have to send love and healing to everybody out there, regardless whether we like them or not. It's just like being a doctor in the war zone. You're going to treat all the people. You treat the enemies and you treat your own people. It's the same principle. We have, because of who we are all one. We're all connected.
And you see it after these fires. Mm-hmm. You see it after these fires. You see it after the hurricanes. Nobody stops to say, are you Republican or Democrat?
Right. No. And we're all people, just because we disagree on a few things, right?
Exceedingly important issues. I know what you mean.
To move our country forward, we all have to work together, because that's how we're going to be the strong nation, right? We have to come together as one. So my last question is, what do you believe is the meaning of life?
Love. Love. That we love one another. Nothing else. Everything else is ultimately meaningless. Yeah.
So it's been such a pleasure to have you as a guest today.
It was delightful talking to you.
So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, and all my best to you as well. And it was lovely talking to you.
As we conclude this episode, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for your presence within my community. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, comment, like, and share this podcast episode. Join my free newsletter in the show notes and receive new podcast episodes delivered right to your inbox. If you resonate with the interconnectedness of mind, body, and soul, and are motivated to embark on a journey of personal healing, I invite you to connect with me at drlottie.com. Together, we can pave a path towards transformative healing in your own life.